I'd like to open with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call attendance.
Ms. De Palma,
Here.
Ms. DeLongo, Mr. Hennessy,
Here.
Ms. Johnson,
Here.
Ms. Putney,
Here.
Ms. Santiago, Mr. Stacy, Ms. Torello,
Here.
Dr. DeLucia.
Here. All right. I don't believe we have any correspondence that I am aware of. Is there anything I'm not aware of? No? Okay, just wondering if anybody else knows. Standing committee reports. We have, for personnel, we were able to come to a tentative agreement with the custodians, and we're waiting on ratification. And that is it for negotiations at this time. And we may have some new policy in the first meeting in October, I believe, and that's it. Anyone? Well, Jack's not here. I was waiting for the scores, but no, there's nothing. I know, that's it, but I was just, expecting it. Let's turn it over to the superintendent's report. Let's look at some data review, shall we?
Yes, thanks everyone. So Lisa and I wanted to move up the K-12 performance review for the 24-25 school year. Last year we did this at the end of October into the beginning of November. And so tonight we'll take a look back at that data. It's kind of our sole item on the agenda this evening, and then if you want to progress it to the next, thanks. So we're going to break down some of that review through the lens of English language arts, math, and science, and then also bring in the loss links, which looks at English language proficiency. When possible, we'll take a look at a 3-year look back. Within our summative assessment data too, we'll drill down into some of our disaggregated groups, looking at multilingual learners, exceptional learners, and the designation that the state uses of high needs. And tonight we wanted to center more about how these noticings, especially when we look at trends, are informing curricular work and next steps with our instructional staff. And then after this, so instead of having our department and building administrators, we are proposing to come back and take a look at them with analysis of our beginning of the year assessment data about a month from now, because that'll be completed. We'll have an opportunity to look at that to see where we're seeing some trends coming into this school year in relationship to where we ended last year. And then we'll take a deeper look too at that time of action steps as they're being implemented at the district and school level. But we'll point some of those out along the way tonight as well. So Lisa?
So we're going to start by taking a look at some of our student demographics. And on this slide, you can see that we're sharing by school and then by district in grades 3 through 8, our percentage of students last year that were chronically absent, the percentage of students across our schools that were receiving special education services, the percentage of multilingual learners, and then those designated as high needs, which includes the special education, multilingual learners, and or students who are qualify for free and reduced lunch. And some of those students fall into multiple categories. And as we might note, that district row at the bottom shows us that 72% of our overall population in grades 3 through 8 are designated as high needs currently. The final column there is a look at our mobility rate, primarily the change from K to 3. So we took a look at the students that were starting with us in kindergarten and the change between kindergarten and 3rd grade. So we looked at where students were on their final DIBELS assessment in 3rd grade to see how much of that population remained with us all that time. And then at JMMS, we looked at the change from grade 4 to 8. We couldn't do 3 to 8 because that was a COVID disrupted year and the data was not consistent there. So you can see the change in our population over years. And we look at demographics really to set some context for the other data that we're going to look at tonight and help us to really understand who our learners are and what some of the challenges are that they bring to the classroom.
Just a question before you go on. The mobility rate, can you kind of explain what that is? Like, I don't want
Yeah.
to think that I'm thinking of it the wrong way.
That's really helpful. And you see this number represented by school in that data packet. What we're really looking at there is a matched cohort. So did students test with us at 2 different points in time? So this is a student that was with us to take the DIBELS assessment at the beginning of their kindergarten year with that BOI. And then were they with us at the end of 3rd grade? And so it's those 2 points in time. So then the percentage you see is who are all the students that didn't fall into that category. So for example, to use the numbers, like 32% of the students in Farrar's 3rd grade class last year were not with us to test at the beginning of kindergarten.
Okay.
Versus and so that's how that trickles down. And then the only distinction from there is JMMS, where we looked at 8th grade to 4th grade, just because we don't have the DIBELS assessment that goes that far back. It wasn't in place with the data available in the same way.
Okay.
So a
Thank you.
third of the students at JMMS that we had an 8th grade score for, we did not have a score for them in 4th grade. So they entered somewhere in between there.
Okay.
Yeah. And we think that that's like a helpful piece just to bring into the conversation, as well as we are thinking about what do the results mean, because we can take a look then and you'll see it represented. Where are there maybe discrepancies with students who are with us consistently and how they're performing versus students who maybe had interrupted schooling or had moved during that time? Is there a discrepancy or not? And in some cases there are, but that's not necessarily the consistent story. Yeah, great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
So before taking a look at smarter balanced assessments, we do use DIBELS as a key summative assessment piece in kindergarten through 3rd grade, and that has been since formalized at the state level with the right to read. This takes a look at, again, last year's 3rd graders, so this year's 4th graders. So of our 190 students with us at the end of 3rd grade, 144 were part of that matched cohort. So they were with us at the beginning of kindergarten and then with us again at the end of 3rd grade. And so this just highlights in kind of a different way of students' readiness when they came into kindergarten in terms of meeting benchmarks as assessed through DIBELS, and then where they were at after 4 years of instruction within the district. There are some slight discrepancies here. So this is one of those areas where students that have been with us did perform better than students who maybe entered the district after kindergarten, but only by about 5%. You see that 5% less were scoring in that above range, and you had that number really just going into the well below. But again, a significant reduction. It's not where we need it to be, but does take a look at the growth in response to student readiness upon entry.
So next we're going to dive into Smarter Balanced Assessment for English Language Arts. And just as a reminder, these scores are reported in 4 different claims. So the test is broken into reading of literature and reading of informational text, writing, listening, and research and inquiry. And in your packets, you received this slide that was the 3-year trend of performance in ELA by grade level. And, you can see that we have some inconsistencies in performance here and some areas that we want to work to address. But this is just the trend data across those 3 years. We're going to dig in a little bit to some other underlying data. So one of the things that we're looking at closely tonight is our special populations, and that is represented in our demographics. So this slide shows, if you look at the color coding at the top, you'll see the light blue is our special education population. The yellow is our multilingual learners. The gray is our students who are categorized as high needs, and then the dark blue is our students that are categorized as not high needs. But just as a reminder from that previous slide, that the non-high needs is only about 28% of our population. So these are not equal numbers across the groups. And if we look at our subgroup performance, we can see here that this is really a place where we see the unique profiles of our learners and the unique needs that they bring to the classroom. The solutions for any one student who is a multilingual learner is not going to be the same solution in the classroom that's going to help them accelerate their learning for a special education student. And so this really illustrates, I think, a lot of the challenges and the diversity of our population right now. So these percentages tell us a story of where a lot of growth needs to happen, and the complexity of some of the challenges that we face.
We also wanted to bring into the conversation another data point with relationship to growth trends. So we'll look at this in ELA as well as math a little bit later. There's 4 data points that are up here represented. So the last 3 years, but then we also wanted to bring in where we were pre-pandemic. So the last school year that was part of that. You would then go into a period where assessments either didn't happen or there wasn't the mandated in terms of getting a full end size of our total population. So 2018-19 versus where we stand today. So in ELA, it is a story of steady but slight progress across these areas. So in 2018-19, the average percent of target achieved, so when we look at all of students and how much of their growth target they're meeting, was 57.9%. Most recently, this past year, we were at 60.8 in English language arts. And then you can see that there's a similar growth within the growth rate in terms of how many students overall are meeting the growth rate that's established. Interesting to note in 24-25, the state's been on a little bit of a steady increase in regards to their performance index with relationship to growth in ELA. So in 24-25, that state comparison is 60.6. East Haven has also had a growth trajectory, but it has been accelerated. So we have increased at a greater rate, and this past year we surpassed just slightly. So the state was at 60.6, we're at 60.8. And that's taking a look at these factors, but also the combination between how the high needs population is growing in relationship to the total population. So it's a positive trend. It is very incremental, but it is steady. This is the same data that Lisa showed you in the bar graph. It's just taking a look at it in table form. But we think that this is a helpful format when we start to think about where do we notice trends or patterns. And so we look at this in a couple of different ways in terms of our ELA performance across grades 3 through 8.
So we often look across the rows if we're trying to look at curriculum or program needs, and if there is a consistent area of concern in these scores, we might dig into curriculum in a particular course or grade level and try and see what might be contributing to that area of concern. But another way to look at this, and something we often talk about when we're presenting scores to you, is cohort performance. So if we're looking across grade 5, we can see over the last 3 years, it looks like there's inconsistent performance in 5th grade, as if there were a dip in 5th grade. But then if we look at that same cohort of students starting in 3rd grade, we can see that there's a steady story of growth with that cohort of students. So they've made consistent progress. from just under 28% to 30% to 35% over the last 3 years. So both views of the data are important for different purposes, but when we're looking at the impact of curriculum on a student population and their growth over time, it's important to really see that cohort progress as well.
Can you hang there for just
Yeah.
a moment? And Lynn, back to your point earlier, so this is what we'd consider a rough cohort. It's not necessarily the matched, like same kids year after year. And so that's kind of that distinction. And when we're talking about like how we can think about mobility, it's just difficult to establish because we don't have a data point outside of Dibbles that's consistent
Yeah.
prior to third grade. And then we also brought in here a way of looking at what's the connection with our iReady testing as well. That is something that we use internally, but we do it to keep a pulse on how students are progressing, especially before third grade. And so here what you see represented were second grade scores. Typically we've reported, I think, like kind of a green, yellow, red, but if you drill down and really look at, this is the percent of students that were ending second grade mid or above grade level, so it's a more truer reflection. So not just growth, but really like where their performance was.
Yeah, firmly ready for that next grade levels.
Yeah. Yeah, and we do see a dip this past year in second grade where we've been consistently in the 30s and we're seeing a dip down to 24%, which is notably pointing out because of a concern.
Are you able to like target that to anything? Like link that to anything?
There's,
I didn't know if
that's
there's
something that
anything in
we're,
the system
yeah, that's
set
something
up.
we're unpacking further, and I'm really curious to see how it shows up in our BOY data. A component, once that's fully collected too, is, you know, last year we put really concerted efforts and funding attached to summer school access to extend students' progress within the area of reading. And so I'm curious what we see showing up there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but next year, yeah.
Right. And so not just with the scores, this is also really important, like Lisa said, to look at that trend data, but then going behind the scores to think about, okay, if we look at the claim and target level, what are we seeing? And so this demonstrates some growth that we've seen, but also some areas of stagnation. So we wanted to point out both. This is zooming in on fourth grade last year in the year prior, so they're 23, 24, 24, 25, and looking at writing, because writing was an area last year where we really put a big focus in terms of developing curricular support at the elementary levels where it wasn't necessarily existing, and then putting a lot of professional learning support in place. And so across the board, we saw significant growth in 4 key targets in writing, so narrative writing, integrating and integrating information. So previously, the year prior, fourth grade, it was coming in below, and we see bringing it to at or near. So students being closer to that proficiency range, if not meeting it. But also the stagnation where even with all of that growth, we still see that we're not, students aren't finding the same success with regards to editing their work or their language and vocabulary usage. So this allows us to drill down even further to say, now where do we see the next lagging resources and instructional support that may be needed? But a true reflection of how hard our students, staff, and families are working. And this was just one grade level, but we saw a similar story play out in writing in general.
Did you notice the vocabulary and editing across every grade level? Because historically, that's been a problem.
Yes, and that actually leads to an area where we were looking at this not just through an elementary lens, but more holistically, and we have found something that's really working in that area in the upper grades, thinking about then how do we bring that down.
So this is a very different looking graph because this is SAT data presented in score bands. So you can see across the left that SAT breaks their scores down into bands of performance where they're really looking at students and you're really trying to elevate students from one score band to the next, with certain score bands in the red there in that red block being ones that would be considered not yet at the college and career readiness band or above. And in the green bands is really where you want them to be, in those upper bands of performance. So this, in connection to the information that Adam was just sharing, there was a great focus on writing last year, and we also noticed that writing and language and sentence structure and grammar, those different elements of sentence fluency and all those things that we were working on in developing the writing program were also showing up in the SAT scores as an area of weakness. And so we added a program to help students practice their actual writing in relation to some of these skills. They have to write and practice their grammar use and their conventions of language and mechanics. And then we looked at SAT last year to see, was there any difference in student scores in that domain after having that intentional practice put into place. And so what we saw was that from their 10th grade PSAT to their 11th grade SAT, there was a 28% decrease in those bands of the red. So a 28% decrease where students were moving out of those red bands, and a 19% increase, which is above the benchmark, for students that were above 490, which is what they consider the college and career readiness benchmark. So, Michelle, to your point, when we look at either iReady scores or these scores, and then dig further into the domain performance, the claims and targets, and then look for places where you might not be able to make big changes overnight, but you can make small tweaks, or look for really discrete areas where you can put something in place or meet with teacher teams and call attention to an area that we might be able to give some increased focus to, that has some results.
And I think this also is an opportunity to highlight that our students can move with the right supports, and we can't wait until they're at this age to be doing that work.
Right.
So like I was meeting today with kindergarten, first and second grade teachers in grade level meetings, looking at what are the lifts in the language standards, because if you don't keep pace with them at a very early age, like the demand by second grade is pretty sophisticated in terms of what students are being asked to produce. But if we are able to keep pace, and if our educators in district are empowered with the right resources that help them to break that down, because it's not for lack of desire and care and passion for the work. It's making sure that we have the right resources at the right time so that we're not waiting to close a gap later on.
Right. In second grade, they're not just writing 3 sentences, they need to write compound sentences. And
Right.
that's a different focus for instruction
Absolutely.
for a teacher.
So we wanted to shift and kind of go through a similar analysis in regards to math. Again, we think about this through 4 claims. So concepts and procedures really make up a bulk of the targets that we get feedback on. But also we look at students' ability to engage in problem solving, communicate their reasoning, and then be able to manipulate data and make sense of data. So really that real world application of the math skills. So again, you had access if you, yeah, perfect. The 3-year trend, and math is a more concerning area, and I think this, well, I don't think, this is an area that we have to take a more comprehensive look, because just as we talked about a steady trajectory of growth within ELA, and a lot of energy has been placed with regards to ELA and reading, we also have to think about our math performance. And there are some movements when we look at our rough cohorts where we see some positive gains, but it's not consistent, and the trend is not moving in the direction that it needs to. And similarly, we can take a look, and we have similar trends within the discrepancy between our students that are non-high needs and then those that the state designates as high needs. And so we see those opportunity gaps persisting, and then that showing up in lagging achievement across the years.
So looking at the growth trend for math, where in ELA we were just ahead of the state a little bit, and our growth rate we're just behind the state level in our growth rate in math. And this really is a place where we need to focus on accelerating learning. We've talked about the acceleration model for intervention at the elementary schools and the work that's being done there, and we need that same acceleration to happen at the classroom level. So that's really a focus of increased attention that we're going to have to pay. We're going to discuss math programming a little bit later on in the presentation, though. So here again is that same chart. This is the same data in table form.
And then again, here we can take a look at it with some of those rough cohorts, and we're not seeing the progression that we need to over the years. And that's been a fairly consistent story. Again, it's really interesting to note those second grade scores as well. It's been pretty consistent in the teens. This again is using iReady, which is not the same measure. There is much more asked on the Smarter Balance, but this is capturing some of that more like procedural knowledge often is what we see show up within the iReady math scores.
And we've also taken a little bit of a look at, like, for example, the change from 7 to 8, where we see there's consistently a drop when students go to 8th grade. There's a really significant lift in the standards where students are moving more into algebraic thinking and reasoning in 8th grade. And that's a jump that we have to have students more ready for. Like, how do we prepare them in those advancing grades to be able to handle that movement conceptually into algebraic thinking and algebraic work in 8th grade.
And we have talked about that acceleration model, not because that is solely about helping students to catch up later on in their academic journey, but it's also about ensuring that we're grounding our work in a deeper knowledge of the standards and thinking about how we ensure that students are working in grade level expectations. So it's not solely about students that might be accessing intervention, but thinking about how the Tier 1 classroom is supporting all learners and building that knowledge of the standards for our teachers, and then how they design instructional experiences for our students. So that's an important piece to call out there as well.
So similarly to when we were talking about ELA, this isn't just an elementary problem or a secondary problem when students are not keeping pace in the early grades. We're talking about what the cumulative impact of that is when they need to handle rigorous problem solving or more advanced concepts and procedures in mathematics. So this table kind of shows the grade levels, and then looked at two different claims on Smarter Balanced. So it looked at concepts and procedures, which is very heavily the content of daily instruction in 3 through 8. And then we looked at the claim for problem solving, modeling, and data analysis. And as you can see, the scores are higher in concepts and procedures than they are in problem solving and data analysis, but not high enough. Not high enough so that students are feeling confident in those mathematical concepts and procedures to be able to apply them to advanced concepts in problem solving and data analysis. And so there's a really heavy cognitive load if you're really thinking about those concepts and procedures. Taking that to the application or analysis level in problem solving is a whole other level that students maybe are not feeling as prepared for as we'd like. And so we look at these numbers in 3 through 8, and then how that maps onto the problem solving and data analysis knowledge and skills domain in SAT. And we see that this is a real area for improvement. We looked at all the domains on SAT, and actually we had a real success story in the scores for advanced algebra from grade 10 to SAT in grade 11, but that's not really what we're showing. What we're showing is that cumulative impact in problem solving. This was the area that showed the least improvement. And I just want to call out that there were other domains in the math performance that were better than this, but we wanted to show that connection from third grade all the way through 11th, so that we can really look at how do we really beef this area up? What needs to happen to accelerate math performance so that they're ready for this? So in the problem solving and data analysis domain, we saw a 4% decrease in the red bands and a 2% overall increase moving toward benchmark. And it's better than not having growth in that area, but it was not anywhere near the growth we saw in the other areas. And so this is really something like taking students away from the algorithms of just doing the problem maybe for advanced algebra, and really understanding how to take that into that problem solving world on a consistent basis is something that we really want to focus on.
Please. I've taken some of those tests, and if you can't read that well, you're doomed to
Yes.
problem solving.
Yes,
So you might think it's a math problem, but it could be the reading.
yes. We are looking at that as well.
Yeah.
And we're gonna talk about that when we talk about program review.
And so this is a great opportunity, I think, to apply what you're talking about there as well, but looking at it in another lens, which is through the NGSS science assessment. So this is administered in 5th grade, 8th grade, and then 11th. And there are a number of, kind of keeping that idea of domains in play. Students cycle through all years in instruction. If we can go back for just a moment.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're fine. Earth and space sciences, life sciences, physical sciences, but then also the science and engineering practices, which is the integration of all of that knowledge and thinking about what we do with it. And so it's important to call out the distinction there. If you had a chance to see this, which is our 3-year trend data, so 5th grade was able to kind of step back up from where they had. Again, that's a different group of students year after year. We continue to see slightly lower performance in 8th grade, and then even going back 4 years, we've had a really steady increase in our 11th grade scores by the time students are in high school with regards to their performance. Similarly, we see the discrepancy in scores play out with regards to the NGSS science test. It is interesting to note the amount of literacy skills that are really necessary on that test as well to be able to engage with it. So it's not just recalling memorized information, but being able to then apply it in some fairly complex problems.
Can I just ask, when was the last time we reviewed the science curriculum for K-5?
That's a great question. This summer. And so I'm actually going to talk about a lens that we used during that process. So we have seen growth in 5th grade with some of the other domains when we actually talk about like earth sciences, physical sciences, but an area of stagnation, if we do a 2-year comparison again with what we'd call more of our targets, is in the science and engineering practices. And the through line here is that it's using data. It's applying math in the context of scientific thinking. And so that was a lens we brought to the review. Big part of the curriculum is not necessarily replacing the materials, but was looking at what are the parts that get skipped as educators are making decisions in regards to time. So a big component was bringing in teacher leadership teams this summer to streamline materials so that our classroom teachers are not wasting time trying to organize and find resources, but making instructional decisions in relationship to their students. A big component too in using Atlas to streamline it was to call out what are some of the really critical components within a unit that actually are about measurement and data, so that we're not skipping those opportunities, because you can create a science experience for students, but it may not be in a manner that is targeting some of our highest areas of need. And so this is an opportunity for that cross-curricular work to occur. We've also really thought about how we can complement some of the elementary writing with science to give students more exposure to the materials and interacting with it across their day. And teachers are doing some really, really interesting novel things that are supporting, again, some of these need areas. So I'm eager to see how that impacts moving forward.
The ML teachers too.
Yeah, our multilingual teachers using that as the basis for some of their instructional support with students. Yeah.
Do the students get science and social studies? They don't get it every day, do they? Both subjects?
So that's a great question. We have worked really hard. When I first came to district, there was great inconsistencies, and that was even just like looking at like a school level. We have worked across the buildings to consistently carve out 45 minutes for cross-curricular content access. We think of it as our S block. So what we do in the younger grades is we are able to alternate about 6-week units in social studies and then science. And so students get that exposure, but it is built into their schedule every day. What we have seen as a promising practice that we are still looking at is we have allowed there to be variance at the school level in 4th and 5th grade so we can study impact. We have some schools that have worked their schedule so that students have access in 5th grade to, say, social studies and science every week, but they might alternate their days, and thinking about the impact that has for students to stay consistent in that content area. So we've only had 1 year of really being able to make that comparison, but I appreciate the efforts at the school level to be creative and then to be willing to study the impact across the district. Yeah.
As far as the science is a little bit older, in the middle school level, I know that there was talk that the STEM programming might have changed for this coming year. What's the reasoning there as far as why that was discontinued? Like the STEM challenge that they usually have at the high school every year?
Gotcha.
So we've had a lot of changes at the middle school, and the STEM challenge was really kind of organized and facilitated by Maria Pompano, who has shifted over into the high school assistant principalship. Nate Testro, the assistant principal at the middle school, is kind of taking on facilitation of the science department with his other duties as assistant principal. And we're also piloting new science curriculum at the middle school this year. And we wanted to take a step back, see if there was a different way to organize the STEM challenge, and maybe do the competition more either at the school level by using this engineering challenges as a way to do some sort of exhibition night or competition that's more at the middle school. But there was a lot of instructional time that was also being allocated to preparation for the STEM competition and looking at our performance results and some of the goals that we're trying to establish. We really thought this was an opportunity to take a step back, look at the pacing of the science curriculum over the course of the year, see how the year played out with the changes in leadership, and then reassess where we were going to go.
Too bad you couldn't do the challenge like an after-school club type of program thing, because it does take a lot of the day's instruction in the science classes. I only know from going in and spending time there with the science teacher, the majority of the instruction during that span of time is all about their projects.
It's like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It's at least 2 weeks.
More
It's at
than
least 2
that.
weeks.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
more
It's
than
2 weeks of building,
Yes.
Yeah.
but then there's prep before the building.
Yes.
It's a lot of
I just
instructional
remember the
time.
excitement of coming to the high
Oh,
school.
yeah. Oh, my
and
kids loved it.
How invested the kids are into that learning. So
And there
I'm
may be an
curious to see
opportunity
how
when I
we're
talk about the
replacing that.
science program at the end. I'll talk a
Okay.
little bit about an opportunity that may exist there as we move forward.
It is a lot of time out of.
Yeah.
It is.
We good on that?
Yeah,
All right.
you can go ahead.
So the last thing we wanted to talk about tonight was our English language proficiency assessment, which is the Lost Links. We've not really highlighted this before, but we are seeing a significant increase in our population over time, and so we thought it was important to talk a little bit about this assessment and some of the needs of these learners. So the Lost Links is given to every K-12 multilingual learner every year, and students are assessed in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And within each of those domains, they have tasks or questions related to social, intercultural, and instructional communication, as well as use of academic language in all the domains, reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And they have questions in language arts, social studies, history, math, science, and technical subjects. So when we get score information back on the Lost Links, we can really see if a student is maybe progressing faster in speaking and listening, but not quite as fast in reading. And that might be a student that we want to tap into those strengths and those assets as a speaker and get them doing more reading. And try to look at how they're an assets-based approach. When students are demonstrating, conversely, that their reading is developing, but they don't speak a lot in class, that's an opportunity for teachers to say, you know what, I want to more intentionally provide opportunities for that student to engage in discourse, because all of these domains are interconnected.
So we think about growth and proficiency differently. So we kind of have to set aside the way that we think about Smarter Balanced and where we're tracking, say, a rough cohort over time and would expect to see that growth. This is really down to the unique individual and their history with literacy and language, both in their first language as well as acquiring English. So we did go back a fourth year here just to demonstrate the growth in population within East Haven Public Schools. So our total population of multilingual learners, and again, this is expanding now to K-12 because we're responsible for monitoring in all grades, was 297 in 21-22. And then last year, we grew to our highest level of 408. So over 100 student gain in terms of that population. Proficiency proficiency and exiting from services are actually two different components. So proficiency you can be overall proficient but may not meet the exit criteria because of the different domains that Lisa just spoke about. But we do over time see steadily that we have more students achieving proficiency across the 4 years, and we do have more students meeting the exit criteria, which is being able to achieve a certain score in reading and writing and having like an overall holistic cut point score.
Just ask, is this data following the same set of students?
It's not necessarily, because we may have students coming in and out. We may have students that just joined us in 24, 25. They may be speaking English for the first time. And that's what this next slide kind of shows, is a breakdown of some of the proficiency levels, if you want to click to
Just
there.
to that point,
Oh, yeah.
the reporting platform that we use that we administer the loss on, we can get matched cohort comparisons, but they're by the student. So really, really valuable for the ML teachers when we meet with them this week to say, like, how is that student doing from second grade to fifth grade, and where do they really need a little bit of extra attention, but really challenging to present aggregate data. They won't give us a performance for the district on a matched cohort.
And that's one thing that comes into play here when we think about kind of 4 different levels. So beginning, early, intermediate, and proficient or above. So these percentages kind of are what they are because there are a significant number of variables that come into play. It could be, again, entry point into the country for someone who is maybe recently arrived to East Haven, Connecticut, the U.S., but this is also factoring in students who maybe were born but they have another home language and have been classified as an ML for many years. Another variable that comes into play here too is thinking about the importance of a child's first language, and so exposure in first language and how that translates over to other language learning when we are working on English as another language in the school system. One thing I will say on that, and did you distribute this paper? Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. Marion had asked for, and we don't have it completely, but we will follow up. You had some subgroup data in terms of proficiency scores on Smarter Balanced ELA and math, and then the Connecticut comparison. So we will follow up so you can track that Connecticut trend. But a couple things to highlight in ELA is that our multilingual learners in East Haven are just slightly outperforming their peers across the state of Connecticut. This is also true for our Hispanic and Latino population, which are not the same group of students necessarily. So that's important to call out.
And we're pretty much right with the state for the high needs as well.
We are, yeah. We're slightly above in high needs, and then our black students are well outperforming their counterparts across the state.
So we're going to shift away from overall test data, except we're going to start by talking a little bit about SAT, and then look at some of the other indicators that we review when we're thinking about preparing for college or career. So SAT benchmark is one of the criteria that we look at for college and career readiness. And again, we're going to take a little bit of a quick dip into a matched cohort. So this is ELA and math performance on SAT over the last 3 years. And we are seeing, again, a slow incremental increase in the right direction over these 3 years. We're making some concerted efforts and some targeted skill work in both areas to try to address some of these needs we're seeing. But this is a place last year that we looked into matched cohort, and we did that analysis again. So in grade 11, we determined that of the 218 students that took the SAT last year, 99 of those students were with us in third grade. So from 3 to 11, it was 99 out of 208, which is only 45% of our 11th grade population last year. And so we looked at those 95 students that had been with us for the majority of their educational career. And when looking at those students, 59% of those students achieved the benchmark in ELA, and 33 achieved the benchmark in math. And the benchmark is the high end of what SAT categorizes as the college and career readiness band. So for example, the college and career readiness benchmark in math is 530 on SAT, but that band starts at 470. So they consider anybody from 470 to 530 in that readiness band. We're only reporting 530 and above. So similar to the charts we looked at earlier, we're looking at the percentage of decrease in those lower bands that would indicate some real need that we want to remediate, and looking at the increase in the students above benchmark. So for ELA, from 10th grade PSAT to 11th grade SAT, we had a 22% decrease in the lower bands and a 19% increase in the upper bands over that 18-month or so period, which is a pretty significant increase for SAT. It is a very challenging test. And then math performance, similarly, we saw a 16% decrease in the lower bands and an 8% increase toward the college and career readiness bands. And this is a good example that if you look at the percentage of students that are in what they consider the college and career readiness band, 470 to 540, there are 17% of our students are in that band, but 17% of those students were not above 540. So they're not necessarily considered in our overall percentage. So that's the end of the high school career in terms of testing. Like, we're looking at the kind of end of the formalized testing that we do for accountability. But then we look back at our ninth graders. How do we prepare our ninth graders and keep our ninth graders on track so that they are ready for what's coming for them in their high school career? And the grade 9 on-track indicator that the state uses for our accountability report has been something we've looked at very, very closely and continually over the course of the school year. We have strategies in place like these ninth grade on-track meetings where all the administrators, the school counselors, the support staff, all gets a caseload of 9 or 10 or 12 ninth graders that we meet with throughout the course of the year to try to just kind of mentor some of these students along. And we've seen a pretty steady and incremental growth or progress toward remaining on track. The on-track indicator is for any student that is categorized as grade 9. So if a student is categorized as grade 9 more than once, they count in your scores each time. If a student comes to us from another district as a grade 9 student, even if they've not been our student historically, they have to earn 6 credits by the time they complete their freshman year of high school. So that's what's considered on track. And just looking at this data, we did see a small dip last year in our on track, and we looked at that percentage. We did a prediction, kind of a predictive run of the data halfway through the year last year, and that number was significantly lower than 85.4. And we were actually very concerned that with the freshman class, like we had some concerns about their transitions, about their progress with their academics, and we actually did make a number of adjustments and put some interventions in place. We worked with families, we made some adjustments to student schedules, we made some curricular adjustments to try and support these students. So this was actually a victory to be, within 1 point of where we had been the previous year. So this is a really strong indicator for us as we progress, and a really good check on our programs and our transitions over the course of ninth grade. So dual credit course performance, we've talked a lot about this. I think Michelle gets a little bit of the credit for this because she really got us connected at Southern, and since we started running dual credit courses with Southern as a university partner, we've really seen our enrollments increase. And this is just the overall number of students that are enrolled in dual credit courses, and you can see this number just skyrocketed last year. And I just want to emphasize that this isn't the number of students who are enrolled in dual credit courses. This is 380 is the number of enrollments that resulted in successful completion by the university standard. So these students met the standard to earn credit in those courses. So 380 enrollments, and we are really paying attention to the kinds of courses that we're offering. We added a business course this year. We're adding a manufacturing course this year through one of the Connecticut State colleges. We added sociology through Southern last year, and we ran 2 sections of that course. So this is really an area where students are looking at college readiness through a different lens and seeing themselves as maybe more capable than they realized when the only indicator they were thinking about was SAT.
And what grade levels are represented?
A small number of 10th graders, many 11th graders and 12th graders, but our number of 11th graders engaged in dual credit courses is significantly higher. And so, like, if we add accounting 2 as a dual credit course, we have the potential to add accounting 3 and more students wanting to take that course because now they've earned credit in the previous one. So, the double-edged sword of that is we're going to need another business teacher because kids want to take all these courses, and the more you offer, the more they want the thing that comes next. And that's a great problem to have. Advanced placement scores from last year. So you can see the advanced placement courses that we offered and the success rate of our students on AP exams last year. So you saw this in your packet, but I want to show that against the Connecticut pass rate because here's an area for us to really celebrate. Our students that are enrolled in AP courses were either right at the same level of the state or outperformed the state of Connecticut in many, many areas last year. So as you can see, you know, a 95% pass rate in U.S. history and an 84% pass rate in U.S. government. But there's even more that underlies that success. And that's the number of test takers in some of these courses. These are very, very challenging courses. And many kids start the first month of an AP course and they're like, this is not like anything I've ever done. And they really start to question their own readiness. And we've been working very hard at that vision of the graduate connection of, you know, the goal-directed resilience. It's different, it's harder, but you can do hard things. And we have had more students staying in these courses, persevering through the challenges of these courses, and really finding success. So if, again, this is in table form, but AP computer science wasn't our highest pass rate, but that's the largest number of students we've ever had in the course or take the test. We had 19 students take AP pre-calculus. 100% of those students got a 3 or higher. We had 47 students take the AP psychology test. And again, it's a 70% pass rate, but that's an AP course where the instructor will, wants all takers. Just come and learn, and it's an engaging course, and it's really accessible and really opens doors for students. And then AP government and U.S. history, always higher numbers and really strong pass rates last year. So this is a real area of success. And then just our last data point to kind of end. Just brings those two data points together. One of the other things that the state looks at is the percentage of our students that are in grades 11 and 12 that are taking either 2 dual credit courses, 2 CTE courses in an approved cluster, or 2 workplace experience courses. And 95.4% of our 11th and 12th grade students met that mark last year. So we're finding ways for many, many students to find opportunities and preparation for life beyond the high school and beyond East Haven Public Schools.
And so, as we mentioned, we want to make sure that the next phase of this is inclusive of our department and building administrators, but there is a through line of an action plan in what we have seen and continue to build upon. So the first part is thinking about how we engage teams in a comprehensive review of curriculum and assessments. Honestly, there were a lot of holes when you look at the curriculum warehouse that we had in place across really pre-K-12. So there has been systematic efforts in place across this year to shore that up, because that is the guidance that our educators need so that they can focus their energy in working with the students directly in front of them. But a really key component of this is using this as an opportunity to, again, anchor this work in the standards and use it as professional learning experience, but tap into the expertise of our teacher leaders as well. Because when you're actively working and building on this and creating a system that then has an opportunity for sustained renewal, that increases your commitment to not only the career, but East Haven is a learning community and the students that our educators are serving. And it has been helpful because there is such extensive review and work needed to do this alongside of where we are currently with artificial intelligence and what that means for the need for us to revamp curriculum to ensure that it is durable and that it is really grounded in the attributes of our vision of the graduate that we want to see. Another component of this as well is thinking about how we develop a shared definition of high quality standards-based instruction. We've talked a lot across last year about the role that inquiry-based learning needs to play so that we are setting students up with those higher level opportunities to both learn and develop the fluency and the foundational skills, but apply them in ways that are meaningful for them and that translate into real world application. And again, the vision of the graduate attributes have provided a great foundation. And last year when we just brought this down into elementary, we're already seeing that that is really helping educators to rethink some of the not just extension experiences, but a reorganization of the learning process entirely to provide that access. And of course, tonight we really highlighted that there's growth needed in a number of areas, but one of those most significantly is thinking about how we are addressing the opportunity gaps earlier on so we don't see the discrepancy in achievement for our subgroups. And so expanding that professional learning that's really centered in our support for exceptional populations, because these are our students and we own them all together and we are all part of a process for their educational trajectory. And I think that that's really critical that we are thinking about how we recenter it along those first two items. So that'll be some through lines that you see in some of the more discrete department and building level work next month. And we wanted to end with just revisiting. This was a visual we showed last year of where some of the curriculum work was at a glance. So starting with elementary, you see here represented both last year and this just because of the continuation. There were some significant gaps at the elementary level that were requiring teachers to really pull from a lot of different areas. Writing was one of the most critical. We are in the second year of implementation where now we're working with all teams across the district, not just early adopters, to ensure that there is time dedicated every day for writing, that we're all teachers of writing, and that we're using that to make those cross-curricular connections for students. Really excited about the continuation of that work. Also, last year we talked more about social studies, so that is moved forward to implementation, but I really wanted to focus on core reading and math. So from what you saw tonight, math is really a critical area of need. However, we do have to work within state mandates, and so we are making some intentional decisions because we do need to think about that we don't burn out our educators in trying to do everything at once. We have been under a waiver with the state with our core ELA program, but it is no longer current where we can access the resources. So we are at that point where we have to now review and adopt one of the state approved core ELA programs while leveraging the work that has been done that has helped us to make this incremental progress. So we have a really diverse team really focusing too on one of those critical action points of ensuring there's representation with an eye towards our multilingual learners, but also our students with disabilities and how they're accessing that core Tier 1 curriculum as well. So we're engaged in a review across the start of this year with a team making a recommendation for where we go next. And then lessons learned from the implementation of our previous program is really thinking about what's the multi-year implementation plan to sustain that work and ensure that we're not just adopting it, but using it to grow our practice and grow our students. However, math is a critical area of need when we think about our curriculum work. So I capture this as refining because we did not want to not address. One thing that is new that it's happening alongside is we did not want to change the core program that is providing some of our programmatic materials in Vision, But we have updated the digital platform, which I am excited about because it's an opportunity for us to revisit consistency and pacing. We see growth in different target areas, but if students aren't exposed to all the grade level standards in a year, you're going to keep passing those gaps on up to the upper grades. And so that's a really critical piece where we feel like we don't need to introduce necessarily new programming, but by thinking about that acceleration model where we're not pausing to backfill before moving on, but supporting students along the way with the grade level content, and then also thinking about our resources that allow teachers to put more of their time and energy to giving feedback to students, to making adjustments to support students, rather than trying to pull together their core instruction. And so that is really what that refining represents. And I wanted to speak to it because it would be a discrepancy with what you saw with the data without the backstory.
And at the secondary level, there's an awful lot going on at the middle school. In terms of writing and social studies, I think we're really focused on vertical alignment and trying to capitalize on the work that's been done by Adam and the teams in writing and social studies. We had 6th grade teachers that are participating in the inquiry pathway alongside the elementary team that's implementing inquiry journeys. We have our writing teachers that are working alongside, they're going to engage as a team to kind of look at all the writing units at the middle school, alongside the guidance that's been provided for the K-5 units to try to make sure that we are elevating the practices that come next rather than starting from a place where students maybe have already had some exposure, looking for ways to use the writing to continue to reinforce the reading skills and vice versa. So there's a lot of realigning, prioritizing standards and revising assessments to make sure that those assessments are really targeting the priority standards in a really focused way. In math, we are piloting the Ready Classroom, which is the iReady product in 6th grade with all of our 6th grade students in EHA and JMMS. So we're looking at that program this year, which does have kind of the literacy focus of the iReady program. That's part of their math, their underlying math framework. We're also exploring some other programs this year and probably into the beginning of next year as well. We don't want to rush to make a program choice for math at the middle school until we've really looked at several. And we're sure that it's going to be the program that's going to work with and for teachers, that the units are in an order that makes sense, that the curriculum is laid out in a way that provides access for learners in a variety of places and entry points. And then in science, we are piloting the Amplify Science program this year in all of the middle grades with a real focus on pacing, which actually that's kind of across the board this year. We're really looking very closely at pacing and making sure that people are spending time where time matters and, really kind of being accountable to that check, that cross check. The Amplify Science program, when we looked at that, one of the things we were really focused on was where were the deliberate connections to the math standards, the math practice standards, and the science and engineering practices are called out very systematically in the Amplify program, and there's a significant literacy component to that science program. So we're really trying to look to make sure that at the same time we are elevating the math and science skills, we are reinforcing that cross-curricular vocabulary, the academic skills, and the literacy skills that they need to be successful across content areas. So that will be in fuller implementation next year unless something very strange happens. That's our hope. The teachers are really liking it, and there's a lot of very, very good material in it. It's a lot. It moves fast. It's very language-based. It's very literacy-heavy in a good way. So it's all's good so far.
Get excited about it.
Yeah.
It's workable, doable, but in smaller increments.
Yeah.
I've seen it being done
Yeah, and very interesting the way they lay out their phenomena and introduce,
The alignment is so,
yeah. And very much to the math. So we really want to look at the math programs alongside the scope and sequence for science because we want there to be a really strong alignment there.
And I think something that's beneficial too that we've seen, would you go back to the action plan, like two back in there, is thinking about the instructional routines that some of the programs introduce too. Like that's a strength we see with the Amplify Science of what are the routines that support student-to-student discourse and sense-making and some complementary practices within the social studies material where, you know, teachers are reporting, I taught this in social studies, but I can use it throughout my entire day. Which is really fantastic to see that students are responding to those. And so we appreciate the questions and engagement tonight. I mean, I just wanted to end with this, you know, like no child can ever be reduced to a number, and it is impossible to quantify the passion and the just ongoing hard work that our educators and the partnership with their families bring to this. But these scores do allow us to study our program and allow us to think about how we are supporting and helping students to grow across the years. And we have work to do. And so it's really important to call that out as well. So we don't minimize the hard work that has gone into every single day of educating the children in East Haven Public Schools while recognizing that we need to push to the next level. And a big component, again, is thinking about how we align the structures and supports for that. So looking at it from the curricular standpoint, thinking about those shared instructional practices, and also in the context of high mobility rates, which mean that we need to think about how we welcome students and support them while continuing the trajectory of all learners in the classroom. So thank you, and we're open to any additional questions or anything you want to revisit.
I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I want to thank both of you for that presentation. It was, not only did you present it a little differently, but I really appreciated what are we going to do about it. And it was very clear that there's a plan, and I could tell it's a ton of work ahead for everyone in the district, teachers, administrators, but I appreciate where we're going. The scores are not great, but I feel confident that we're going to get there.
Thank you.
I have a few questions, they're kind of all over the place, and some comments as well, just throughout the presentation. Do we give an assessment when a student moves into town? Like, do they take some sort of an assessment for placement, or?
That's a great question. We do have a combination of different diagnostics that we might use to get an understanding of students' baseline. Sometimes that might look like taking a standard assessment, depending on when it's at in the year, like iReady, and administering that to understand where students are at score-wise. But it also, we do that on a deeper level in terms of, say, like math fluency or reading performance. So that is a component. We have talked about, though, how that's an area where we've been revamping our multi-tiered systems of support handbook to more formalize that so that there are shared practices and we're not reinventing the wheel across buildings or across grade levels. So it is a critical area that we look at.
We do screen all of the multilingual learners that enter the district. We do get a lot of information if we have a student that enters that's a student with disabilities. And the state does have a platform that also allows us to look at historical data on any student that's entering from another Connecticut public school. So say a student moves from West Haven or Fairfield, doesn't matter where they're coming from, we can see any historical data on their Smarter Balanced, their previous attendance rates, things that might be helpful in helping us to support a new student.
Oh, that's good to hear. Early intervention, if they need it, is key, obviously. So.
And special education students, their scores would be reflected in their IEP, which has the present levels of performance based on very specific tests.
Perfect, thank you. And then this is kind of a, I everything is kind of based on being able to read, right? Like how Tom mentioned math and then the science. And I don't know what the mandates are from the state or how it works. Do we, in kindergarten, obviously they kind of start with their learning to read. When do we start to focus on math? And if, I mean, would it be prudent to maybe spend more time, like their entire kindergarten on, I don't, like I said, I don't know exactly how we go about that now, but focus on the reading and then math later on, like wait another year, or I don't know how that works, or if you.
Yeah, that's a great question. It is a balancing act that we do look at. I can talk a little bit about like the delineation of instructional minutes that we worked to create some consistency that might help with that. Delaying access to math would really, you'd see that pay off later in compounding, just because there are so many critical benchmarks that are happening developmentally that you never make up that ground. But we do organize the day so that about 100 minutes are dedicated, like literacy block, foundational skills, small group with students, instructional focus. So it is weighted heavier in the earlier grades, but we still do try to carve out close to 60 to 70 minutes for math and look for those opportunities to spiral throughout the day and to make that integration. One thing we've looked at as well, both at the pre-K and K level this year in regards to professional learning, this is actually the second year for it, we've created some integrated experiences on professional learning days for pre-K and K teachers to work through play-based learning. So thinking about how we make that math learning really developmentally appropriate. That's another component where the state has put some language around access that students need to have during the day. And we see that as a great opportunity for kindergartners to not only engage with their math learning, but also to strengthen their study of science and social studies, because that can lend itself really well to very engaging play centers that are really meaningful as well. And it's not required, but we've been pushing that work down into pre-K as well. When we take a look at that baseline of where students enter in kindergarten, we see that, we are very lucky to have an early learning center and interact with our students early on. So thinking about how we leverage that time even prior to entering kindergarten. Yeah.
And have we considered, just as really early intervention, a possibility of maybe a transitional between kindergarten and first grade, or first and second? Is that something we've looked at? Is that, something that's helpful? I've seen that done in the past. No, I think that's really great. I am eager for us to apply the noticings from the summer enrichment programming, because I think that that's an opportunity where we see that really positively. Every single one of our kindergartners that participated this summer met the grade level benchmark for first grade by the end of the program in their instructional focus. I'm curious, once we see the final wrap up, did that carry forward that next month into their first grade BOI assessment? And so that is something we're looking at really carefully and thinking about which grades responded the best, and can we be more intentional with our resources, because every kindergartner that didn't reach proficiency was invited, but not everyone attended. And so thinking about how we can get that message out there for the programming. Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Really great question though.
And do we offer like any kind of SAT prep help for the high school students, like instead of taking a study hall? It's non-credit or whatever, but do we offer anything like that?
We have an SAT prep class that students can sign up for. Most do it in the junior year if they're going to take it. And in the last 2 years, we've offered an online SAT prep, like a digital program that students can move through on their own. And if they moved through it in a study hall and they showed that they completed, we actually awarded credit for it. We haven't had a lot of students that were interested in doing that. I think the students that are interested in that level of SAT prep are also taking, 5 dual credit courses or honors courses, and I think they run out of time, to be quite honest. But we will offer it again as an option for kids that are in study halls.
And of the AP classes the exams, was there a large percentage of kids that did not take the tests? Like they couldn't afford to take the tests or?
There was not a cost prohibitive factor to it. Like there are not students that are not testing because of cost.
Okay.
We do have a fair number of students that don't necessarily test in those courses where, say, like the AP literature class is also a UConn ECE class. If students are taking that for UConn ECE credit, they may not take the AP test because they're already going to get the college credit through UConn, and many universities require a 4 or a 5 on that AP test in order to award credit. So the UConn course is a better option for them. And we have some other AP courses that similarly are dual offered, and the students make a choice.
Okay.
But it's not from a cost standpoint.
Okay, all right, good. I'm glad to hear that. And what else? I just had a suggestion, really, about, you guys have the writing center at the high school. I don't know if maybe at the middle school, some high school students may want to help the middle school students. I don't, with math, I mean, that was just kind of a suggestion, maybe community service hours or something.
Thank you.
And did we, people talk about the new math. I don't know when like new math started. And I'm just wondering if there's been any, like how many years it's been now, and has there been like a change in the scores over the years, like, and has it negatively impacted or has it been a positive impact? And you may not even have this data, I'm just kind of curious.
I couldn't answer that right now, but it would be interesting to.
I could have
So-
been terrible.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I think it's been terrible, the new math.
So it's in reference to the Common Core State Standards that were adopted, and we are going into almost the second decade of interacting with it, and
Wow.
yeah.
That's a long
A
time.
long time.
One thing that we have learned and are seeing successful with our students, one of the emphasis that's placed at the elementary level is helping students to get exposure to lots of different ways to make sense of math and to think about how you personalize it and what works well for you. We've actually found success for students, and we see it represented in kind of some of the intervention tracking, and then it may not show up necessarily in a proficiency yet, but we see it in the growth that students are making towards it, is really narrowing them in on one or two ways, like exposure, because those are the standards, but to help them find what is most successful and then to be able to stick with that. And again, that comes back to that interaction and engagement between intervention, classroom teacher, thinking about where that lives in the acceleration model. Sometimes the standard algorithm is really just the best way for a student to process and to make consistent progress. So it's a great point.
And really my last thing was, you guys just got this data recently, so you had your plans in place. Did you need to tweak anything, or was this kind of where you saw the data and your expectations? Were there any other challenges that you came upon that you weren't expecting?
I can speak to one, really at the elementary level. The third grade numbers were in many ways a little surprising. And I'm curious as they continue to receive support because, if you don't meet that absolute threshold, then it's not proficient and above, it's then below. One of the really critical areas that we took a harder look at, we did all this writing work. And after we saw students' performance, we went back and developed a mini unit before moving into some of the genre-specific writing in ELA to look at how we're supporting students with developing a constructed response. And that we felt was an important area to think about the rigor of writing and the expectation, but also that relates then into communicating your reasoning in math or being able to write towards a claim in science. So we found that to be a critical cross-cutting area. And that was absent in the initial plan, so we were able to spend some time and get that integrated so that teachers in third grade will be able to introduce that in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that.
And because it was kind of a welcomed opportunity to adjust mid-course, because we were able to make some stronger connections with the social studies curriculum as well, and thinking about how we're also supporting students to read and bring in information from across multiple sources, because we found a lot of what we were asking them to do was in one source, and that was a chance to reevaluate and see where we could also support their reading progression. Yeah.
I think on the secondary side, it's, when you look at this slide of that connection between, like, where does the data support what you're seeing in the review of curriculum and the professional learning that you're planning and the instruction that you're seeing when you go into classrooms, there are things that click when the data comes in, right? You look at the claims and targets and you think, well, we're looking at this science program and we had a conversation about the crossover of math and science curriculum, so we want to look really closely at that because it showed up in the claims and targets and we're reviewing programs. So I think the data doesn't always, even if it isn't surprising us, I think it always provides insights into the other work that you're doing, and it gives you that ability to kind of triangulate some of your decisions based on multiple data points. So I think that happened with math and science, and it certainly is happening in terms of pacing. We're looking at the amount of time people are spending on different topics and really working more intentionally on how much time should be allocated to things so that we can make sure that, like, there's some connection there between those priority standards that are really critical to master at the end of a grade level and the time that's necessary to make sure that that happens.
Well, thank you for a very comprehensive, well put together presentation, and I appreciate all your work, and I look forward to seeing your plan in action. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the questions.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? All right, then we will move on to, I'm going to assume no assistance before I think we wrap that all up.
Could you queue up the next hour-long presentation?
All right, COFO?
If there's any questions, I'm here. If not, we have all our invoices and fuel information in the packet.
I'm good.
Okay.
Anyone else?
I'm here if you need me.
Good?
I'm good.
All right, so that brings us to accepting a meeting minutes for September 9th, our regular board meeting. Is there any revisions? No? Then we'll accept the minutes. So our last item, or section for this evening, is our audience of citizens. Is there anyone here who would like to speak? No? Sorry, we're all looking at you.
No pressure.
Okay. All right, so that brings us to the conclusion of our meeting. Again, Adam, Lisa, thank you so much. We all appreciate it. I'm sure there's going to be more questions at the next meeting. And in saying that, if anyone does have anything to request for the next meeting, I'm going to say maybe if you could send those in by October 9th. That should be a good date bet for our next meeting is the 14th.
That's the
14th.
October. You're away?
I'm away.
If you have anything you'd like us to cover or to find out,
Okay.
please let me know.
Okay.
All right, guys, that's it.
Yeah.
Done.